video has no pictures to watch, only a voice and a story. A story about something familiar, something small, something that rarely feels fragile. A toy, a brick, a system we assumed would always be there. In the dark, details emerged differently. Objects became symbols, habits become choices, and companies become human. Tonight, we take something ordinary and we hold it under a different light. A small plastic brick and a question: how does something so simple almost disappeared? Tonight, Lego. Before the plastic, before the billions, there was a Danish carpenter, Ole Kirk Christiansen, born the son of a poor farmer, one of 13 children. In 1916, Ole Kirk Christiansen used an army savings to buy a small woodworking shop in Billund, Denmark. That same year, he married Kristin Sorensen, a local cheesemaker's daughter. In 1932, the world was broken by the Great Depression. No one was buying furniture, and tragedy struck further when Christine died shortly after giving birth to their fourth child. To survive as a single father of four, he took the leftover scraps of wood and made something smaller. Wooden toys, pull-along ducks, yo-yos. The transition was brutal, and he almost went under, securing a desperate $21,000 loans just to keep the doors open. But he refused to compromise on quality. Once, his son, Gottfried, tried to save money by giving a shipment of wooden ducks 2 coats of varnish instead of 3. Ole Kirk forced his son to fetch the ducks from the train station, unpack them, and apply the final coat by himself by the middle of the night. It sparked a motto that still hangs in their headquarters today: only the best is good enough. By 1935, the economy was recovering, and he held a contest among his employees to name the company, offering a bottle of homemade wine to the winner. He ended up winning his own contest. He called his work Lego, from the Danish leg godt, play well. But survival is rarely a straight line. Twice his workshop burned to the ground. First time in 1924, when his young sons were tinkering the shop, and again in 1942, a massive electrical fire destroyed every toy, every blueprint, every trace of his life's work. He didn't walk away. He rebuilt, and he rebuilt bigger. The true catalyst for the transition to plastic occurred shortly after World War II. Traditional materials like wood and stone were in short supply, while plastic was rapidly growing in popularity. In 1946, Ole Kirk attended a toy fair in Copenhagen where he encountered a plastic injection molding machine for the first time. The vendor gave him a sample: small plastic interlocking building cubes developed by a British company called Kittycraft. Seeing the brilliant potential, Ole Kirk made a monumental gamble. In 1947, he bought Denmark's first plastic injection molding machine. It cost a fortune, more than double the company's entire profits from the previous year. By 1949, they rolled out the first plastic bricks, originally named automatic binding bricks. But the first transition wasn't an instant success. Sales were poor throughout the 50s. The early plastic bricks were completely hollow underneath, meaning they lacked clutch power. They slipped and slid apart easily and could not securely stick together. His son, Gottfried, refused to give up. He spent a decade constantly refining the plastic bricks, finally adding the signature hollow tubes to the underside. On July 28, 1958, LEGO officially patented the modern plastic brick with the perfect grip. The founder died of a heart attack that exactly same year. He never saw the global empire his wooden toys would become. He spent his entire life building a company that would touch 1 billion lives, but he died when LEGO had just 415 employees and operated in one small town. He just knew one thing: when everything burns down, you build it again. The founder died, but his son Gottfried carried the vision forward. In the 1960s became a time of massive growth, but Denmark's small population could only hold so much. To survive long term, LEGO had to go global. In 1961, they crossed the ocean. They expanded to North America, contracting with a company called Schweider, which we know now as Samsonite. They produced bricks in Denver, Colorado, using molds rented from Europe. This ensured every American brick would connect perfectly with a European one. To handle this massive expansion, LEGO bought his own airplanes. There was just one problem: their hometown of Billund didn't have an airport. So Gottfried did what a builder does. He directed the construction of one. The Billund Airport opened in 1964, literally altering the landscape to connect his bricks to the world. By the mid-1960s, tens of thousands of fans were flocking to the main factory. They needed somewhere to go, so in 1968, they built the very first Legoland Park. The opening was a massive success that helped cement LEGO's status as a global sensation by the end of the decade. The park was originally conceived by Gottfried Kirk Christensen to solve a practical problem. In the mid-60s, over 20,000 fans were visiting the main LEGO factory each year, which was disruptive and dangerous for an active industrial workspace full of machines. Legoland was built to give these fans a dedicated handcrafted experience, exploring what the company had to offer, which allowed the factory to focus solely on manufacturing bricks. When the park opened on June 7, 1968, the public response was immediate and overwhelming. On the very first day, the crowds were so unexpectedly large that LEGO executives, including the marketing director, had to step in and wash dishes in the park restaurant's kitchen to keep up. During its first season of operation, Legoland hosted over 625,000 guests. This attendance was more than double what the company had initially planned for, and incredibly, it represented more than 10% of Denmark's entire population at the time. By the end of the decade, LEGO was no longer just a wooden toy shop, it was a global sensation. There are brands that feel permanent, but permanence is often an illusion, because the disasters didn't stop with the fires. In the 1970s, a perfect storm of external pressures hit. The global oil crisis struck, and the price of plastic skyrocketed. LEGO, a company that lived and died by plastic, saw its production cost explode and its profits vanish. To make matters worse, their original patents on the brick design were expiring. Cheaper imitation toys flooded the market just as early electronics toys were beginning to emerge. Facing this massive financial threat, Lego panicked. They tried to become everything to everyone. They abandoned their focus on the simple brick and began manufacturing dolls, baby toys, and various educational kits. They launched lines like Duplo and Technique. They forgot what actually made them special. This extreme loss of identity pushed the company to the brink. By 1981, Lego was weeks away from total insolvency. They were drowning in warehouses full of unsold products, while retailers flatly refused to place new orders. To survive this near-death experience, they had to take drastic measures. They were forced to take out their first ever loan, cut their staff, and close facilities. They only managed to pull themselves back from the edge by doing exactly what they would have to do again decades later. They stripped away the distracting products line and painfully returned to their foundational system of simple, creative building blocks. They had survived the fire, and they had survived an identity crisis. But the hardest lessons are the ones we forget. Long before their next financial collapse, there was a quieter moral compromise. The founder, deeply affected by his time in World War I and the horrors of World War II, had a strict rule: war should never be made to seem like child's play. Lego had a resolute no-weapons policy. To enforce this pacifist stance, they went so far as to completely ban the color green. They deliberately refused to manufacture green bricks for decades, fearing children would use them to build realistic military vehicles like tanks. But in 1981, in pursuit of a new story, Lego bent the rule. They launched the Pirates line. For the first time, the universal, innocent, smiley faces was replaced by uniquely printed, scowling faces with eye patches and birds. For the first time, they released skeletons, which they had previously withheld because selling dead minifigures felt wrong to kids. And for the first time, they introduced guns, cannons, rifles, and pistols. The Pirates line was a massive commercial success, becoming the third pillar of their catalog, but it was the first crack in the foundation, the first time they compromised their core philosophy for expansions. Success creates a dangerous question: what else can we become? As the digital age arrived in the 1990s, Lego panicked again. They believed kids didn't want simple bricks anymore. They wanted screens and instant gratification. They stopped believing in the brick. They started answering the question of growth not with restraint, but with frantic expansion. Lego entered theme parks, video games, clothing lines, even Lego branded shampoo. And then there was Galindor, a disaster line of clunky action figures with swappable limbs with a failed live-action TV show. A toy that forgot what a brick even was. Slowly, something subtle changed. The brick stopped being the center. The system became fragmented, and the more Lego tried to grow, the less it looked like itself. In 1999, the foundation shifted again. For the first time, Lego bore something else's story: Star Wars. The traditional executives hated the idea. They believed relying on Hollywood was too volatile, too risky. But the company was desperately searching for a lifeline. Launched just in time for Episode 1, the sets changed the rules. Minifigures suddenly had uniquely printed heads, different skin tones, short legs. It was an instant, massive hit. During the darkest financial years of the early 2000s, Star Wars, along with Harry Potter, became the only thing keeping the lights on. It revolutionized their business model. Today, licensed teams make up roughly half of everything they create. It was a brilliant financial savior, but it was also a dangerous illusion. The massive influx of cash made leadership ride high and believed their struggles were finally over. They thought they were saved. They didn't realize the deepest part of the crisis was still waiting in the dark. On the surface, everything looked fine, but underneath, the system was breaking. Each new product line required new molds, new logistics, and new decisions. The number of unique Lego elements ballooned from 6,000 in 1997 to nearly 14,000 by 2004. Complexity multiplied quietly. By 2003, Lego wasn't just losing money, it was bleeding. They were losing nearly $1 million every single day, downing in over $800 million of debt. The absurdity reached a breaking point. For some specialized sets, the cost of manufacturing specific parts like micromotors and fiber optic lights was actually higher than the retail price of the entire box on the shelf. Lego was literally paying customers to take their toys. They had become a company that did everything but understood nothing. There's a moment in every crisis when the problems become undeniable. In 2004, the Christensen family did something rare. They brought in an outsider, Jürgen Vig Knudstorp, a 35-year-old former McKinsey consultant with zero toy industry experience. He looked at the chaos and he didn't ask what else they could build. He asked, "What must we remove?" The turnaround didn't begin with innovation. It began with a ruthless abstraction. Knudstorp started cutting. He sold off the beloved Legoland theme parks to raise cash. He fired staff, and he slashed that massive catalog of unique parts in half. He simplified relentlessly. He went back to the core, the brick. He told his designer, "If you want a dinosaur tail, you don't mold a new piece, you build it out of existing bricks." That is the essence of Lego: structured creativity, freedom within rules. Subtraction saved them from immediate bankruptcy, but to grow again they needed an engine for innovation. They found it by doing something they had historically refused to do. They let the outside in. For decades, Lego had ignored a massive community, the HAFOL, or adult fans of Lego. Leadership suddenly realized these weren't just customers. They were an untapped global design lab. Enter Lego Ideas, formerly Kuso, a crowdsourcing platform where anyone can submit a design, a DeLorean, a Minecraft set. If an idea gets 10,000 votes, Lego produces it. Every project that reaches those votes doesn't just represent a good idea, it represents a guaranteed market. They effectively outsourced their R&D. They didn't just sell plastic bricks anymore. They created a platform for co-creation. They stopped seeing their customers as people to sell to and started seeing them as people to build with. Subtraction saved the company from immediate ruin. Crowdsourcing gave them a new engine for ideas. But to truly conquer, they had to change how the world actually saw the brick. In 2014, they took a massive risk and released the Lego Movie. Critics expected a 90-minute commercial, a cynical corporate attempt to sell more plastic to kids. Instead, they got a masterpiece, a critically acclaimed film that grossed nearly $470 million worldwide. But the box office money wasn't the real victory. The movie did something much more valuable. It made Lego cool again. It reminded the world that the interlocking bricks wasn't just a simple children's toy. It was a medium, a language for storytelling. And by tapping into pure nostalgia, it opened the door to a massive, untapped market. Adults. The leadership finally realized that the kids who originally grew up playing with Lego were now adults with money to burn. Suddenly, the plastic brick wasn't just for children. It was mindfulness. It was stress relief. It was heart. It's easy to think this is just a business story, a turnaround. But in reality, it's an historical pattern. Because 2003 wasn't the first time Lego had to relearn his lesson. It was the third near-death experience. In 1942, the founder entire wooden toy workshop burned to the ashes, forcing him to rebuild. In the 70s, facing an oil crisis and expired patents, Lego panicked, tried to be everything to everyone, and nearly went insolvent. 3 times they almost vanished. 3 times they survived by stripping away the noise, by remembering what they actually are. When systems grow too fast, they lose coherence. When options multiply, clarity disappears. When everything becomes possible, nothing feels essential. Lego survived because it did something most systems resist. It chose less. A Lego brick from 1958 still connects perfectly with a brick molded today. It still connects the same way, still follows the same logic. In a world that constantly reinvents itself, that kind of stability feels unusual. But maybe that's the point. Not everything needs to change. Some things needs to stay exactly the same, so everything else can make sense. Because sometimes the most powerful move is not to build more, but to return to the piece that holds everything together. Tonight, we enter the dark room.